In the final years of World War II, as cities burned and empires crumbled, something far stranger was unfolding behind the walls of Nazi laboratories. This was not just a war of bullets and tanks, but a war of imagination pushed to its darkest extreme. Secret blueprints spoke of weapons that defied logic, machines that could fly without wings, weapons that could strike from the edge of space, even devices rumored to bend the laws of physics themselves. Many dismissed these as desperate fantasies of a collapsing regime. But declassified documents, recovered prototypes, and eyewitness accounts reveal a far more unsettling truth. Some of these ideas were not only real, they were terrifyingly close to working. The question is no longer whether these weapons existed, but how close humanity came to unleashing technologies it was never meant to control. The war was already lost. Berlin was surrounded. The skies above Germany belonged to the Allies. And yet, deep beneath forests, mountains, and heavily guarded bunkers, something was still being built. Not weapons to win the war, but weapons that felt like they belonged to another world entirely. Imagine standing in the ruins of a bombed-out city, when suddenly, without warning, a deafening roar splits the sky, faster than sound itself. No warning sirens. No time to run. Just impact. This was the terrifying reality of the V2 rocket, the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. It didn't just change warfare, it changed time itself. By the time you heard it, it had already hit. But the V2 was only the beginning. Behind it lay a hidden network of secret projects known as Wonderwaffe, the Wonder Weapons. To the public, they were propaganda. To the scientists working in silence, they were something far more dangerous, proof that the limits of engineering were being pushed beyond anything the world had ever seen. There were aircraft designs that looked like flying discs, circular machines with no visible wings, rumored to hover and move in ways conventional physics struggled to explain. Engineers experimented with vertical takeoff jets, decades ahead of their time. Some prototypes resembled what we would later call UFOs. And then there were the weapons that sounded almost impossible. Massive cannons designed to fire shells into the upper atmosphere, so high that they could strike cities hundreds of kilometers away. Sonic weapons that aimed to shatter internal organs using sound waves. Even early concepts of stealth technology, attempting to make aircraft invisible to radar. Each project raised a deeper question. Were these inventions acts of desperation, or glimpses of a technological future arriving too soon? What makes this story more disturbing is not just the ambition, but the secrecy. Many of these programs were hidden so effectively that even high-ranking officials within the regime had no knowledge of them. Entire facilities were buried underground, powered by forced labor, shielded from bombing raids, and protected by layers of misinformation. And yet, despite the chaos of war, these projects continued. Why? Because for those leading them, this was no longer about winning battles. It was about reshaping reality itself. About proving that human ingenuity, no matter how dark its purpose, could break every known boundary. But as historians and scientists began uncovering fragments of these projects after the war, something became clear. Some of these weapons were not just experimental. They were operational. And others were dangerously close. Which raises a chilling question that still echoes today. How far did they actually get, before everything collapsed? To understand how close these weapons came to reality, we have to step inside the minds of the engineers who built them. Because what they were attempting was not random madness, it was structured, calculated, and in some cases, scientifically brilliant. At the center of it all was a radical shift in thinking. Traditional warfare relied on scale, more tanks, more soldiers, more firepower. But Nazi scientists began chasing something different, efficiency through innovation. One weapon that could outperform 1,000. One breakthrough that could rewrite the rules of war overnight. The V2 rocket was the clearest example. Powered by liquid fuel, guided by gyroscopic systems, and capable of reaching the edge of space, it was decades ahead of anything else on Earth. Its trajectory followed a suborbital arc, essentially turning the battlefield into a miniature version of spaceflight. What made it terrifying wasn't just its speed, but its inevitability. Once launched, it could not be stopped. But even the V2 was just a stepping stone. Engineers began experimenting with designs that eliminated the need for traditional runways. The concept of vertical takeoff, machines rising straight into the air like rockets, was tested using early jet propulsion systems. Some aircraft prototypes, like the Horton Ho 229, used blended wing designs and materials that absorbed radar waves, making them almost invisible to detection. Decades later, these same principles would become the foundation of modern stealth aircraft. Then came the more unsettling experiments. The Sun Gun was a theoretical orbital weapon, essentially a giant mirror placed in space, designed to focus sunlight into a concentrated beam capable of burning entire cities. It sounds like science fiction, but calculations were made. Designs were drafted. Scientists believed that, given enough time, it could be built. Even more disturbing were attempts to weaponize sound and energy itself. Sonic cannons aimed to create vibrations powerful enough to rupture human organs from a distance. Directed energy weapons were explored in primitive forms, early steps toward technologies that today are still being developed. But perhaps the strangest path of all was the obsession with unconventional propulsion. There were rumors, some supported by fragmented evidence, of experiments involving anti-gravity concepts, high-voltage electromagnetic fields, and circular flight platforms. Most historians remained skeptical. And yet, recovered documents showed that serious resources were allocated to these ideas. Not fringe theories, but state-funded research. Why pursue something so uncertain in the middle of a losing war? Because desperation breeds risk. And risk sometimes leads to discovery. After the war, Allied forces scrambled to capture not just territory, but knowledge. Operation Paperclip brought many of these scientists to the United States. Their research didn't disappear. It evolved. It became the foundation of the space race, modern rocketry, and advanced military technology. Which leads to an unsettling realization. These weird weapons were not dead ends. They were prototypes. Early versions of technologies that would shape the modern world. But hidden within that legacy is a deeper, more disturbing truth. If these ideas were possible with 1940s technology, what happens when they are fully realized? By the time the war ended, much of Nazi Germany lay in ruins. Cities reduced to ash. Laboratories abandoned or destroyed. Blueprints scattered, burned, or buried. It should have been the end of these impossible weapons. A closed chapter. A warning from history. But it wasn't. Because the most dangerous thing the Allies captured was not land, or machines, but knowledge. Engineers who once built weapons for a collapsing regime were suddenly working for new superpowers. Their ideas didn't disappear, they were absorbed, refined, and reborn. The same principles behind the V2 rocket would evolve into intercontinental ballistic missiles, capable of crossing entire continents in minutes. The same aerodynamic theories behind experimental flying wings would shape stealth bombers that could penetrate defenses undetected. The line between science fiction and reality didn't just blur, it vanished. And slowly, quietly, the world began building weapons that no longer needed to be seen, or even understood, to be devastating. What makes this evolution unsettling is not just the technology, but the mindset behind it. The belief that if something can be built, it should be built. That innovation is neutral, even when its purpose is destruction. The scientists who once dreamed of reaching space did achieve it, but the first rockets that touched the edge of the cosmos were designed to fall back down and kill. It forces a difficult question: was the war the catalyst, or just the excuse? Because many of the ideas born in that era were not abandoned due to impossibility, but due to timing. They arrived too early, in a world not yet capable of completing them. Concepts like orbital weapons, directed energy systems, and advanced propulsion didn't vanish. They waited. And as decades passed, technology began catching up. Today, satellites circle the Earth with precision. Hypersonic missiles travel faster than sound, just as those early rockets once did. Stealth aircraft move through the sky almost invisible. And research continues into weapons that operate in domains once thought unreachable, space, energy, even the electromagnetic fabric surrounding us. The strange experiments of the past have become the foundations of the present. And that is where the real unease begins. Because when we look back at those secret weapons, the flying discs, the sun guns, the sonic devices, we see them as relics of a desperate regime. Fantastical, exaggerated, almost unreal. But history suggests something far more uncomfortable. They were not fantasies. They were previews. Fragments of a future glimpsed too soon. Which means the question is no longer about what was built in the shadows of World War II. The question is what we are building now, in our own shadows. Because humanity has always stood at the edge of its own imagination, turning ideas into reality, without always asking whether it should. Every generation inherits the discoveries of the last, pushing them further, faster, and often, more dangerously. We like to believe we are more advanced, more ethical, more aware. But the same force that drove those scientists, the desire to break limits, to dominate, to prove what is possible, still exists within us. And perhaps that is the most unsettling truth of all. Weapons don't begin as machines. They begin as ideas. And once an idea exists, it never truly disappears.